So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Today I will take you through a journey through the thrilling threat landscape of today. I will tell you a bit about how the vulnerabilities in your environments creates your attack surface. I'll also explain to you how to avoid being the victim and instead of feeling stressed about the topic, being on top of it and knowing your risk. So my name is Jesper Madsen, and I run the Vulnerability Operations Center in Orange Cyber Defense, Sweden. From there, we run a managed service for customers all over the world. So today we stand in a digital landscape that is both exciting, but also dangerous. A landscape where the number of vulnerabilities increase every day. Just this last year, we saw over 26,500 new vulnerabilities. And if we compare that to the years before, we can see that this is a number that only increases and increases. So this causes an insecurity in that a product that we all believe is secure today can tomorrow be our biggest threat. So our quest isn't without its demanding challenges, of course. With limited resources and an ever-expanding digital world, the difficulty lies not just in detecting the vulnerabilities, but also in discerning which ones to prioritize. So let's imagine a medieval city. They are preparing for a siege because their scouts have seen the enemy marching towards their city. So they have a stone wall around the city, and they know this is quite old. It hasn't been fixed for a long time. So there are some cracks, there are holes in different sizes. So which ones should they fix before the enemy marches toward, or the enemy arrives to them with their limited time? And the answer is not to start in one end and fix every cracking and hole until you are on the other end. But of course, they would focus on the biggest holes where it would hurt them the most if the enemy hit them there. So we should have kind of the same mindset with vulnerabilities in our digital world. As we have a growing amount of digital assets, the world is more and more digitized. So a vulnerability scan of our environments can often reveal tens or even hundreds of thousands vulnerabilities inside of the organization. And these vulnerabilities, they are your attack surface. All the weak spots a hacker can use to gain entry and break in. So if the vulnerabilities are everywhere, and the amount is a bit overwhelming, where do we start? So context is king. Just looking at raw vulnerability data from a vulnerability scanner, I think we all will be lost just looking at these results. So contextualized data and threat intelligence are our guides that takes us from a reactive chaos into a proactive strategy. So interestingly, I said we have this many new vulnerabilities, but only 1,114 of all of the vulnerabilities are known to be actively exploited. So it's not just about the increasing amount of vulnerabilities that should alarm us, but rather the potential damage that they can inflict. So let's just sidestep a little bit into an incident response story that I have borrowed from a friend. This is from our incident response center in the CERT. So we had a client that got information from Interpol that Interpol had seized a threat actor server. And on this server, there were data from the client's Active Directory. And they called our incident response center, which immediately went to action and tried to contain the affected domain. From that, they went to seek out, okay, what's the harm done here? So they found 2 Cobalt Strike beacons on the domain controllers. From there, they try to investigate and find what's the point of entry from this threat actor. And this was an insecure Citrix gateway that had a known vulnerability on it. So they took this, talked to the client, and he said, that's impossible because we don't have Citrix. So our team said, yes, you might think that, but here's the proof. You do have it. And it took some convincing, I heard, but obviously this guy was devastated because not knowing about the system that is the cause of intrusion is a bad day. So vulnerability management, it's nothing new. It has been in the sys controls for many years, and it's still there. Why is it still so challenging? So let's look into the challenges a little bit. The sheer volume of new vulnerabilities, it can be overwhelming. If we compare to previous years, and maybe for 10 years ago, it was so much smaller. So we are dealing with a volume now that is unheard of. Prioritizing which vulnerabilities to act on. There are so many different frameworks and scoring systems, CVSS, EPSS, SysAkev. Which ones should we follow? Patching is also a challenge. When can we patch? Do they allow us to take down the server or client for maintenance? Resources. Who should do this? Who should put the time aside from their ordinary work on the day to patch? As the guy with Citrix, he probably thinks that yes, complex IT environments is something that we have. We merge companies, we have old systems that are undocumented. It's really hard to keep track of them all. Oh, sorry. Lack of visibility. If you don't know about the system, how would you know about the vulnerabilities there? Threat intelligence is also, it's good, but as we have so many new vulnerabilities, how do we keep on top of all of the news that is incoming? So staying on top of it can be a full-time job. And lastly, organization culture. Do we have the right processes? Are we allowed to spend time on this? Who coordinates the work? And so on. Do you recognize these challenges? Anyone else that wants to add something? Let's just take a look at some interesting misconceptions. So if we find too much, we will find too much if we scan everything. So let's start small with one site and be good at that before we continue. And this is a false truth, because this creates, you have a black hole in your visibility, and it's the false security.
you think you're doing good in one part, but you can have severe vulnerabilities and severe risks in all of the other parts. So seeing everything is the key. We need to patch all of the vulnerabilities before we can start scanning again. And the world moves fast. As I said, there are new vulnerabilities with critical every day. So it's better to staying on top of it, fixing vulnerabilities that are new, rather than completing your list, because you will never complete the list, I promise you. Automated patching solves all of the vulnerabilities. I think automating is good, but it doesn't solve everything. Automations fail. It can be due to pending restarts, failed download, a missed configuration of the automation, and so on. So this doesn't set you free from vulnerability scanning. So I think automate as much as you can, but you should do scanning either way. I talked to one guy just today who said they deployed a fix for a vulnerability from Intune. The installment failed on one machine, and that one machine got hacked. Vulnerabilities are only IT's problem, and I think we can all here agree that this is not the case. It's a shared issue. It's a shared responsibility between stakeholders and departments. Windows is most vulnerable, so let's run Mac instead. No platform is safe. All software is prone to have vulnerabilities. It's just a matter of time. So don't believe this. And if actually, with this example, if we take a look at the amount of vulnerabilities on Windows, it's huge compared to Apple, of course. But if we take a look at the ones that are in the known exploited lists, the attackers are attacking as many vulnerabilities on Windows as Apple. Using CVSS as our only way to prioritize. CVSS is good, but it's not great. It has been better with the latest version, but it doesn't cover all. So we need a more holistic approach, taking all of the factors in mind. So here we have some statistics from all of our customers' vulnerability data, where we have divided into industry. This is from our Security Navigator. It's a free research paper. You are very welcome to download it. So here we're taking a look at the average age of vulnerabilities. So from what I think is really interesting in this graph, if we take a look at finance and insurance, they have a really low average, but they also have the highest maximum age. Comparing that to health and healthcare, which tries to patch everything, it looks like, because their maximum age is quite low. It's by far the lowest. But in turn, it bumps up their average. So they are not as fast at responding on the average vulnerability. So I have talked about our challenges. So how do we overcome them? So continuously doing asset discovery and vulnerability scanning is a must. If you can't see it, then how would you remediate it? So visibility is key. Knowing what you have enables you to take action where it's needed. So don't be the guy who thinks he doesn't have Citrix. Scan everything. Scan weekly, both network-based scan and add agent-based scan as well to get as much coverage as possible. We should use risk-based prioritization to know the risk inside of the organization. I will go deeper into this in the next slides. Form a great patch management strategy to cover both the planned and scheduled ongoing patching of all of the software inside of the organization, but also have a strategy for how to act, who should be responsible for when you need to take immediate action on the high-risk vulnerabilities. Visibility for the correct stakeholders. Does the Linux operations guy have visibility on all of the vulnerabilities on his responsible assets, and does the client team has the same? And does the CISO have an overview of all of the organization? Communication is, as always, key between departments, between stakeholders. It's crucial to have not only communicating that there is something, but also having the understanding that we might need to take this asset offline, even though it is crucial for the business, because the risk that we are having here would be really bad for the company if it's exploited. And threat intelligence, you need to have reliable sources that you can trust and give you as much information as possible. And this would preferably be integrated into your vulnerability management solution. So with a risk-based approach to vulnerability management, you take a holistic view into the device and the circumstances around the vulnerability on it. You use all of the known factors to make an informed evaluation of the actual risk of the asset on both the asset and the vulnerability together with threat intelligence. So here are the factors that we think are really important. For external scope, we look at the severity of the vulnerability, which type it is and how easy it is to exploit, how popular it is, which age. Is it on the CISA KEV list? That means, is it known to be exploited right now? And also take prediction into this. So how likely is it to be exploited within the near future? So we mix this with the internal scope, business context. So asset criticality, how important is this asset to the organization? Where is it in the network? How critical is the how sensitive is the data on it? And is it part of a compliance scope? So when we combine all of this, what do we get? It's the real risk. It's the real risk of the vulnerability on the device right now. So there are some calculations done to cook this down to a number, which is called risk score. And as this risk score and all of this data is using live threat feeds, this is a dynamic score. So the risk score for one asset and for one vulnerability can be one number one day, but a totally different number the next day, depending on threat actor activity. So we do this for all of the devices and all of the vulnerabilities in the organization. And that means we have a risk score for everything. And now we know the real risks. Now it's easier to put your effort into where it really matters. And what this teaches us is that we might not now go for the CVSS 9.0, because that vulnerability might be on an asset that is locked down in the environment, in a network, and it's hard to exploit, so no threat actor has any idea on how to use it. But instead, we might have to rush to the vulnerabilities CVSS 6, because that's on a web server that is internet-facing, and it's really easy to exploit, so every script kiddie has an exploit kit for it. So let's repeat the steps on embracing risk-based vulnerability management. So first we define the scope and make sure that we have all of the scope. We scan everything to have visibility on everything. And we set up scanning occurring weekly. We add the business context onto the assets. And here we can use automation, or we can use CMDB data to enrich the assets. We enrich further with threat intelligence and create the risk score. We act on the risk score, going for the highest risks and highest risk vulnerabilities first. And then we can evaluate how good are we doing this. Follow up on SLAs, see which departments are better than others, and so on. So protecting the organization environment is obviously important for all of us. So that's why we need to create awareness on the risk remediation needed at all levels, from system owners to users, all the way up to the board table, because we need to have everyone on board. Understanding about the risk is very crucial. As I said, it's not only an IT problem or security problem, because the risk is against the organization. If we get an intrusion because of a vulnerability, I can assure you it will affect the core business of the company. So be the advocate of change inside of your organization. Get high-level overview of the risk, of the total risk in your organization. If an area is underperforming, it's now easier to investigate why are we underperforming in the remediation here. Are we having too few resources that can do this? Or is it organizational? That means they don't let us take the server down for maintenance. And based on the results here, we can take strategic decisions on how to build security in our organization. If that's hire more people or redesign the infrastructure or whatever is the best solution. So let's sum this up. Knowing what you have and knowing yourself and your weaknesses is a vital step of staying secure. That means that you need to know everything and see everything. If you can't see your vulnerabilities, how would you remediate them? There are different tools on the market for this. Some are better than others. So make sure that yours are using all of the factors that I have spoken about today. And if you have a scanner that doesn't do this by default, there are reporting tools that you can put on top of this, ingest all of the vulnerability data into, and they can do this very good. Remediate and fix your highest risks first. There will be new vulnerabilities. The work is never done, so always fix the top ones. And it's never too late to start. Even if you have never done vulnerability scanning and are afraid that you might find 1 million vulnerabilities inside of your organization, don't worry, because if you follow these steps, if you follow this strategy, and you touch only 1% of the vulnerabilities, as long as you remediate the ones with the highest risk, you will make a great impact in the total risk of your organization. Of course, there will still be other risks, but you will take care of the ones that are most likely to be exploited. So some lessons to bring back with you. Check over your scanning schedules and scope. Are you actually including all of your IT environment? Are you scanning frequently? Are you using agents? And so on. Look at your patch management routines. Do they cover all of the software in your organization by default? And which process do you follow when you find a high risk vulnerability? Have a think about what you're doing to create awareness about vulnerabilities inside of your organization. And check the stakeholder visibility. Can the correct people see the vulnerabilities on the devices and assets that they have responsibility for? And make sure you have great threat intelligence. And lastly, make sure that you know yourself. This is the most important thing. So thank you for your attention and your ears. This has been very wonderful. This was everything from me. And I will be outside in our booth to the left. It's the big Spartian temple. So if you want to chat, just find me there.